Welcome to Watch Symposium. I'm Austin. All right, so what's the intrinsic value of a Rolex? Well, that's a very interesting question. What do you think? Well, first, I think before we talk about this, we need to define our terms. Intrinsic, all right? Well, intrinsic means it's essential to an object, or it's what constitutes an object. So if you're talking about the intrinsic value of a Rolex, and I'm not borrowing, at least for now, terms from economics, then you probably want to talk about the raw materials in that Rolex watch. And this is an argument that people who love really low-end watches love. And they'll come to your channel, if you have a channel that talks of Rolexes, and they'll talk about a Rolex having an intrinsic value of $600. That's something I've seen, because I think it's valued, the actual raw material, to be something about in the range of 600 USD. And so there you go, a Rolex worth 600 USD and not a penny more. Everything else you're paying for is name only. Or is it? Well, you got to take into account the function. And some people might say, well, in this day and time, you've got phones, you've got other means of telling the time and better ways of telling the time and cheaper objects and watches to tell the time. So I'm not going to give much value to the Rolex watch's ability to tell the time. But of course, back in the day, in the 1950s, for example, before the quartz watch came along, then there was a lot of value there in the watch's ability to tell the time and do it correctly, and do it in all situations, in water, in harsh environments, and whatnot. Now, some people might take issue with me attaching the functionality to intrinsic value. Maybe, but you really can't discount it, the functionality of the watch. The other thing is, if I look at my shirt and I say, well, you know, the raw material in the shirt is pretty much cotton and some dyes, and I could probably buy the raw material for $3, probably less, on the internet. So is the intrinsic value of this shirt $3? Well, you got to make the shirt. And I could give you all the materials to make a Rolex watch, and you couldn't do it. Well, you could, you might be able to, but it's going to take a heck of a lot more than what it would cost just to buy one. That's sort of a plus when it comes to mass-produced objects. You don't need to go out and make your watch. They make the watch, R&D is factored into it. A price is decided, and you get one. And you don't have to design it yourself and hire people to make a movement and all that kind of stuff. Again, is it fair to factor that in intrinsic value? Well, if you have a really strict definition of intrinsic value, no. But you can't not factor that in. You have to factor that in. Now, let's borrow a little bit of a definition from economics. Now, economics, at least the site that I found when I was Googling it in the 3 minutes I was doing my research for this topic, listed perceived value as an element of intrinsic value. And if that's the case, then you've got to agree that a lot of people perceive Rolex as being more valuable than 600 USD. I just point you to the free market. Now, there's a couple different ways we could look at this question, and everybody's going to have a different opinion. Are you, and I think this really what it comes down to when people make this argument, they're trying to say the name is, you know, 5 times the value of the watch. And that's what you're paying for. And the name is certainly something you're paying for, and you're paying for the object in terms of its horological significance in history and where it lies in the history of horology and what it means to people. and what it means to have one on your wrist, what it means to be seen with one on your wrist, what it means to feel it on your wrist, what it means to enjoy it, what it means to experience it, experience a beautiful, functional piece of art. I think you have to factor those in. And so when anybody comes and says the intrinsic value of a watch is the raw material, I would think twice about it. Now, it's almost an argument that I hear myself making when it comes to precious metal watches, because oftentimes the value of the precious metal in that watch is really not justifiable by the price. I mean, a steel model will be 4 times cheaper, but is there, when you actually look at the raw material and the gold or the platinum in that precious metal watch compared to the steel, does it justify it? No. So what are people paying for? Well, the intrinsic value, if you're factoring in the perceived value, is the fact that it's a really fancy looking watch. It's what people would call an F-off watch. And so you do have to keep that in mind. And it's an argument I find myself making when it comes to a precious metal watch. But for a lot of people, that 4 times price for the precious metal watch is going to have a lot more perceived value than a simple steel piece that isn't going to be noticed. All right. So let me know what you think. This is an interesting subject. If nothing else, I hope you come away just at least a little bit convinced that we can't judge a Rolex simply by the raw materials it takes to make it. And while some people might say it's just worth about 600 USD, because that's what Rolex spends to make them, more or less. Be careful. Let me know what you think. Take care. Thanks for watching. See you next time.